Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Essential Skills for Humaning. I am your host, Christina Eanes, and today we get to speak with Jeff and Staney. Welcome, Jeff and Staney.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on, Christina.
Hey, Christina.
Hey. Well, now, before we get started, can each of you share just a little bit about your backgrounds with our listeners?
Staney, please go first.
Well, we happen to be married for a long time.
Forever is what I understand. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, forever. Apparently, maybe, before conception, whatever. But anyway, I'm Staney DeGraff. I'm the CEO of our consulting practice, the Innovatrium. And we've been married for forever. We live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have 3 kids and 1 grandson.
Oh.
And we used to have a lot of dogs. But right now we are dogless and we are very sad.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm Jeff DeGraff. I'm the old professor here. I've been a professor at the Ross School of Business for close to 40 years. Before I got here, as one of the guys who built Domino's Pizza, was advisor to Steve Jobs. I've been in most of Fortune 500 companies building these big innovation ecosystems over the years, many of them which your listeners will know about.
Awesome. Yeah. And author of several books. The one we're talking about today is The Art of Change. So before we get into, because I am very curious, I want to know more, I'm sure people do, about the paradoxical, I'm saying the right, mindset and thinking. Anything to set us up for that conversation?
Yeah. This is the 3rd book in a series, a mindset series. All these books have been adopted by the Department of Defense, and they're used widely in corporate America. But one of the challenges that I think Stanley and I found with really high potential, really smart people is they had a lot of trouble with the ambiguity and incongruity that comes with change, the paradoxes that appear with change. And it almost seemed like the smarter and the more capable the people were, the more they were stopped by it. And of course, innovators sort of live in that space because there is no data on the future. You're kind of making it up as you go along. And so we thought, well, it might be time to actually talk about how do you actually get through a paradox. And more and more, I think, we're sort of micromanaging our students as they come up because they're also concerned about getting an A, and here's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. We do the same thing with our soldiers. We do the same thing with executives. But of course, the real secret sauce to America is our ability to make things better and new. And we could talk, if you want, about our work on the COVID vaccine or some of these things that are highly ambiguous, that are really important inflection points. And so we thought, well, why don't we make a book that brings this not only to that group of people, but to everyone, to be more human, as you would say.
Yes. I love that. I love especially how y'all mentioned the different types of thinking in the book. And one of them was strategic. And I love how you talked about it, celestial navigation, dead reckoning. Because right, it is tough. I always hate doing like the 5 or 10 year plans because every 5 or 10 years looks completely different. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, think about now.
Yeah.
I mean, for crying out loud, inflection points. I mean, look at the market. And, we were talking earlier, I'm still an advisor to the Fed and the military and all this. And it's just this incredible upheaval point. And it's not that we don't need to make these changes. It's just that, there are ways to do this. And when we go through these kind of, real radical things, we have to have some of these tools. So basically, the book basically says there's 4 steps to this, which I think is the key to this. The first one is you have to find the paradox. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'll give you some stories as we go through this. But the first one is what doesn't quite work here. Now, most of the time, people try to manage the middle. What I'm suggesting is managing the exceptions, managing the things that don't make sense. Right. And if you talk with your friends about things that don't make sense and they try and push it in one direction, you know that they don't understand the situation. So that's the first thing, is kind of seeing authentically what you're looking at. Well, the second is, what does it mean? Right? Why is this happening? And that becomes the most important part, where you have to kind of 360 walk around the problem. You have to talk to people who are different than you. You have to assume different personas. You have to really swim out way farther than you're comfortable with. And that really means disconnecting the chatter in your head, which is just really reinforcing all this stuff. And it's really quite sad these days because of social media. You can hear people think, right?
Yeah.
And it's, and they're stuck in these kind of routines where even, we'll talk about this, even when they get disconfirming feedback, they can't break the routine. So you have to be very mindful about this. Again, I'm kind of critical of mindful literature because it's really kind of missing what I think mindful means. Mindful means be aware of your thinking process and where you're stuck in a rut.
Metacognition.
Yes, very good. That's right. That's exactly right. Cognitive inquiry strategies, right? The third step is you have to turn the insights into principles. What am I learning here? What can I divine from this? Failure is a great teacher, but most people fail, just continue to fail, right? The issue is how am I getting smarter here? What can I divine from this? What are the simple rules that I can build out of this so that going forward, I don't make the same mistakes and I find new opportunities? But the final part and the most important part is you can't get stuck in the planning cycle. You got to run the experiment. How do I test this? How do I see if this is a real thing? So those are the 4 steps, right? Number 1, you have to spot the paradox. 2, you have to reflect on the meaning. Number 3, you have to look for guiding principles. Number 4, you have to run the experiments. Stanny, you want to add anything to that?
I think the big thing that we have seen through all our years of working with the corporation and also with the military is this agility of your mind, or we call it cognitive ability. Can you move from one set of situation to another one? Can you see where you are, what's going on around you, and what's maybe the right response? Or not freeze up when something, identified, unexpected happened. But then how do you kind of figure out what to do, right? It's this whole rapid sense making that you need to do. And in order to do that, when you're in an ambiguous situation, like what Jeff is saying, we see a lot of people really have a lot of problem when they see uncertainty, right?
Yes.
Some people freeze up, some people do other things, but the point was that it's developing your ability to be able to sense make rapidly and how to do it well, because we're not trying to get people to do things that are reckless, right? We're trying to teach people how to sense make. So I think that's the big thing, and in order for you to make sense, Carl Weick has great books and great research on the sense making, but it's all about interacting with the situation, interacting with the environment, reflecting, and then be able to look for the things that don't make sense. Disconfirming feedback.
So let me give you an example that your listeners can use. So, there's this whole, there are obvious paradoxes that we all deal with. So social media was meant to bring us together. It's not keeping us apart, right?
Yeah.
The whole technology in your pocket was supposed to make your life easier. Now it makes work going at home. So if you think about this for a minute, if you think about you're a victim, I've got the technology in my pocket, so work comes at home. Well, it also works the other way. So the next great kind of invention or the social movement is going to be bringing home into the workspace. It's going to be, how does the workspace become something where I develop meaning, where I get healthy, where my children prosper. So if you're looking at where the opportunity space is, it's not on the victim side. It's on, well, this thing is working this way against this other thing. What could be done in the middle here to create a better way, a hybrid way, a third way, not compromise, but a different road? right? So, when we see these things nationally, are immigrants a good thing or a bad thing, right? Well, it's interesting because, over 50% of all the patents applied for that are awarded last year were awarded to people who either weren't born here or first generation Americans. The whole history of innovation in America is the history of immigration. Well, there's also a real problem that a lot of people are immigrating and we don't have real good control over it. So we have these two issues. Right. So one is it's the source of vitality, another it's the source of real challenges. Well, whatever is in the middle of that, whatever that incongruity or that paradox is where the future is going to be. So what I'm trying to get at is it's not people look at the trends and where everything makes sense and goes, that's what's going to happen next. No, that's incremental lines. And as we're seeing, events disrupt everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about the COVID vaccine. Think about the Great Recession. Every now and then, just like your personal life, something happens. People don't change unless there's a reason to change. So they get divorced, they lose their job, they go their financially underwater, whatever it is. And the reason is simple, because risk and reward is reversed then, right? When risk and reward is reversed, meaning it's more risky to stay where you're at and more reward trying something, we start looking in these paradoxes. We start searching them out.
Yeah. Well, and so I have found, at least in my work with individuals, right, we're in our own brain, we're in our own thoughts, we're in that confirmation bias constantly, right? So how can the individual, and this might have been some of your previous books, but how can they train themselves to see things differently?
I think that I want to hear what Stanley has to say, but I want to give you a simple answer.
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself with people who don't think like you.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
That's a big one.
But
and listen to them.
Yes, it's the creative power of constructive conflict. Now, let me explain what that means. Going back to our studies, going back 40 years when we started studying this stuff, it's not destructive conflict. There's a difference. We're not marginalizing people. We're not prejudicial. No, we're very open. So diversity is required here, and particularly cognitive diversity, different worldviews. But what's so important is it's constructive. So when you go to places that create a lot of intellectual property, create a lot of new ideas and write great books and all this stuff, you'll find people who don't think the same way and don't agree, but find a way to create hybrids or go forward together. And so all you got to do is look at where most of the intellectual property comes from in the United States. It comes from about 20 to 30 places. And what you'll notice is they're far more diverse than their adjacent areas. Yeah. Right. So this is a really key issue of the easiest thing to do is get out of the circle you're in and widen the circle with different people. Now, Stanley, what do you think?
Well, I completely agree with you. But in addition, I would say train yourself to always do things like look for the disconfirming feedback, look for things that don't make sense. Think about who should be present but not present. Think about who's present that is not supposed to be present. Things like that. So you have to just keep on looking and train yourself to keep on looking for the odd things or the things that missing or shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think the hardest thing right now for people is to get people out of your head. Right? It's sad. I mean, the great thing about being an American is all the freedoms that we have, and yet we let other people occupy large bits of real estate in our brains, and we don't push them out. They need to be evicted. Yes. Because until you evict them, you're not going to know what you think. And so many people you talk to these days, you basically hear the news feed that they're listening to. And, my feeling is that's all the game you got. I mean, come on, you're an American. Let's, and not just America, of course, this is everybody, but you have freedoms to think differently.
Yeah. Nice. So training our brain to think differently, being more open. So perhaps talking to that someone in a productive way that has a completely opposing viewpoint on something that we do. The other thing I heard earlier that you're talking about was ambiguity, essentially, right? Being comfortable with ambiguity. And I know that is a huge issue. There's some of us that are like, hey, bring on the next change, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. There's others that are like, no, like it has to be a major pain point. I don't know, nurture, nature, maybe a combination of both. But
I think it has a lot to do with both. I think it's the notion is ambiguity is a survival mechanism. You try to avoid it.
Yeah.
Some people, there's even some research that maybe prejudice is based in this. I hope that's not true, but who knows, right? But I think the big thing about ambiguity is there's no data on the future. And the real problem with ambiguity is people get stuck in the planning cycle.
Yes.
The meeting about the meeting, the report about the report. They never launch the ship,
yes.
right? The other problem with ambiguity is, the people who have so much certainty. Innovation pays in the future, right? And the most dangerous people I've ever met are the ones who say, go big or go home, because they're making huge bets on something that they don't know anything about. And they basically take everybody with them, right? So the notion is what you do when you don't know what's coming next is you hedge, just like financial people do. You spread it out. You diversify your investment. You give it very little time, very little money. And it's what Staney had said. What you're looking for is disconfirming feedback. You're not looking for confirming feedback. You're saying, what isn't working here? So think of it like this. Here's a good metaphor for everyone. It's fishing. You don't know what's in the lake. So what you do is you start throwing stuff, bait, lures, all different kind of stuff. And much to your surprise, this fuchsia rapala is catching, and there's walleye in the lake or whatever metaphor you want to use. I'm from up north. I live in Michigan, right, where all the water is, 95% of all the fresh water, right? But that's all it is you're fishing, and you have to go through that process of being optimistic that you'll catch something, but not certain about what happens next.
Yeah. Creating the conditions that will bring about the opportunity that we hope.
I think one of the things Stanley and I get associated with are all these big win projects, these huge ecosystems. The truth of the matter is neither of us ever know which one's going to work.
Exactly.
It's just start out, and a lot of times it's the one that you thought was kind of the outlier, and it turned out to work, and you make, then you learn from that simple rule. We don't know what's going to work. We have to try it.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
But it's like what you just said, Christina, and I liked what you just said. You said bringing about the environment in which these things can happen.
Yeah.
That is the number one role of a leader. I think the number one role of a leader is to create the conditions by which people feel. I don't like the word safe. I think a better word would be confident.
Empowered.
They feel that they can go, empowered, better. Thank you. Right word. Empowered to move forward, to grow. And when people personally grow, it's infectious.
Absolutely.
And being innovative and changing is very much part of growth. Organizations, like people, have two functions. One is to survive, but the second is to grow. And what people don't understand is their oppositional functions. One eliminates variation, the other creates it. And the same thing goes on with companies. And the point I'm trying to make is that this tension is not bad. It's
exactly
good. It's what drives you. It's what makes you work.
So learning to appreciate that tension and
one of my heroes, I have a big picture of Benjamin Franklin in my office. Think about his life. His life is like a succession of things, well, I'm moving on to that, and I'm moving on to that. And he wasn't a very good husband or father, but, he picked the things to move on to, and it's his incompleteness that pulls him forward. It's not that that's a problem. That's his superpower.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Anything else to add, or anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we get to your products and or services on this topic?
Stanny?
No, I think we covered a lot of things. I think I would just probably add one thing. It's difficult to do this, and and being in a place where you're not really sure, right? So it takes a lot of courage. And you kind of have to forgive yourself when you make mistakes. It's okay. I tend to be hard on myself. If you're used to working with things that you're not aware of, and then you, like what Jeff's saying, it's if you just kind of mess around with things and whatever not, it's fine. You've developed a skill. For some of us, it's a skill that we actually have to really think about and making sure that we're okay with it.
Yeah, I would build on that. I would simply say you can't control the future. And one of the key paradoxes we put in the book is we use facts to change minds, but minds aren't changed by facts.
Yes.
So what I would add is go out and have experiences. That's the key.
Yeah.
Try stuff, get on airplanes if you can, talk to people you don't normally like, have experiences, because experiences are the only thing that really changes people's minds, the only
Yeah.
thing that opens up your minds.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I love that courage was mentioned, because I really can't stand when people say you need to be fearless. Fear is a good emotion, right? It helps us stop and think, but feel the fear and then move forward anyway. Have the courage to move forward. Fear does not mean stop. It means, let me look at this a little further. Am I outside my comfort zone, or is this really a threat? Okay, I'm outside my comfort zone. Let's do this.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of things to think about, obviously the new book is called The Art of Change, Transforming Paradoxes into Breakthroughs. So hopefully your readers will go out and get that. And,
Yes.
and there's filled with stories of the COVID vaccine and how we worked on that and how we worked on this other stuff. Of course, we give it all different names, but it's out now. There's a website for this called theartofchange.net, which they can get a discount on the book if they do that. I'm one of the original LinkedIn influencers. So if they look for me on LinkedIn, Jeff DeGraff, often called the Dean of Innovation, they can find me there. Stanny doesn't like being on that social media stuff, so I'm going to leave it to her. And then finally, we coined the term and actually built the first Innovatrium. And Innovatrium.org, if you go to Innovatrium.org, you can learn about all the consulting stuff and speaking stuff and all that other kind of stuff that people do. And Stanny, I'm sure will be happy to answer your emails. I'm busy grading right now.
Awesome. And then they can find your other books at that as that link as well.
Yes, they can find all the trilogy of books that really create the school of thought. Is the Innovation Code, the Creative Mindset, and of course the Art of Change. And this is kind of what these were they were easy to read for people who are normal people. You don't have to be a business executive. We wrote these books for people who are just trying to have a good life.
I love it. Yeah, sometimes book can get too big, businessy or academic-y, and it was very nice to read through for myself. Yeah. Okay.
Stanny, anything to add?
No, thank you so much, Christina.
Awesome.
Thanks, Christina, for having us on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Transform your organization with Eanes Training. Our premier interpersonal skills training programs are tailored to enhance your organization's employees in communication, emotional intelligence, leadership, and more. We have a catalog of expert-led courses designed to meet the dynamic needs of today's workforce. With highly engaging in-person, hybrid, and remote sessions, we can help elevate your organization's performance and success. Learn more at eanestraining.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills, and until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.